Uh, Good morning, Co-Chair Bynum and Co-Chair Manning. First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to testify. My name is Barbara Kenny, and I live in Springfield, Oregon. First, I'd like to give you a quick introduction of my family. My husband and I have been married for 38 years. My husband was actually born here in Springfield and moved away for school and to work, and then we retired here in 2017 from the Washington, D.C. area. We had two children, Patrick and Kimberly. Patrick was the oldest, and my daughter Kim is 29. And Kim is also an Oregonian. She graduated from Oregon State University. Patrick, first, a little bit about what he liked to be called. He liked to be called Patrick by his family and friends, so that's how I'm going to be referring to him in my testimony. But he liked it when the outside world referred to him as Stacy. He was a kind, sweet, generous, and super, super smart. He held 2 bachelor's degrees, one in engineering, one in physics. He was a national merit finalist. He had an 800 on his SAT, and he had a full ride scholarship to Ohio State. But that wasn't all he was. He placed second in the state high jump competition his senior year of high school, and he was on the swim team, and he did choir and soccer, typical things one might do in high school. Tragically, he developed schizophrenia when he was in college, and this is an incurable brain disease. It made it difficult for him to plan for the future. It made it difficult for him to stay organized, and it caused him to feel anxious about things. He had absolutely no history of violence. So when I was asked to speak, I was asked that you wanted to hear about 3 things: the story of what happened, the impact of my family on my family, and policy ideas in 5 minutes or less. So I'm not sure I can do that, but I'm going to give it a shot. And I did submit our lawsuit, which has a much more detailed account of what happened, and also a more detailed written testimony. So that's in the record. But here's a brief summary, and I want to apologize in advance. I almost feel like one of these things where you tell the radio, caution listeners, this might be disturbing. But this is what happened to my son. Patrick was shot and killed by the Springfield police following a traffic stop. The entire incident took less than 5 minutes. Prior to shooting him, 4 Springfield police officers shattered the driver and passenger side windows of my son's parked car, pulled him by the hair in an attempt to drag him out of the broken window, punched him in the face repeatedly while they were holding his head by the hair, yanked the sweatshirt off of his body, shot him with tasers in his abdomen and groin and back, and then subjected him to 5 cycles of taser shock, all while he was unarmed, on the phone with a 911 operator, and restrained in the seat of his car by his seatbelt. The officer who initiated the stop and began the assault by breaking down the driver's window hit Patrick so hard and so many times that he actually fractured his hand, a so-called brawler's fracture in the process. I, as a mother, had never heard that term before. On the passenger side, another officer broke down that window, opened the door, and crawled into the front seat, delivering blows to my son's head and face, including a blow with the blunt end of his knife, which caused a fracture to my son's skull. After withstanding this assault for about a minute and a half, Patrick was able to put his Nissan Leaf into gear and accelerated away in an attempt to escape further violence. Unfortunately, the officer who had crawled into the front seat was still there when Patrick left the scene. This officer shot Patrick 5 times, essentially at point-blank range, including twice in the head, in order to stop the car. The car careened out of control once Patrick was dead, and it crashed into a fence in a parked truck. This officer broke his arm in the crash. This incident was investigated by the Interagency Use of Deadly Force Investigative Team, and the district attorney ruled the shooting legal under Oregon law, probably because at the instant the officer pulled the trigger, she had determined that he had a reasonable fear for his life. However, her public briefing describing the circumstances of the incident leading to Patrick's death make absolutely no mention of the violence he suffered up to the point of being shot 5 times. There is a circumspect reference to a, quote, fight, unquote, between Patrick and the officers in her briefing, with the implication that Patrick was somehow fighting back while passively restrained in his seatbelt and turning his body away so the taser barbs could hit him in the back. But there's no physical evidence that he was doing anything other than defensively trying to protect himself from the blows raining down on him from all sides. And I'll get back to that in a bit. So the next thing is he wanted to know about the impact on the family. And I have processed these events and bucketized them into three groups. The first one is what I call the trauma of grief. And if any of you have lost a loved one, you know what that's like. It's coming to terms with the fact you'll never see this person again. And if it's a child, you know it's even an order of magnitude harder. And it's like a hole in your soul that eventually heals, but the scar is with us forever. The second bucket I would call the trauma of violence. It took me months to comprehend and understand what the words meant and of what had happened to my son. I had no experience with these kinds of things. And I think the process of coming to terms with it will take years. And the third trauma is what I call the trauma of system response. So I'm an Air Force veteran. I'm a retired military. I'm retired from the federal service. I have over 30 years with federal service. I pay my taxes on time. I followed rules all my life. And when people came to my house and said there was going to be an independent investigation and they would, they couldn't tell me right now what had happened, but they would tell me as soon as they figured it out, I believed them. I mean, I believe in the system, right? This is how it's supposed to work. But what is just so incredibly shocking to me and caused me so much emotional anguish that was not necessary is that's not what happened. The event was investigated by the IDFIT team. The results were presented to the DA so she could determine if a crime was committed. I get it. She determined a crime was not committed. Okay, Oregon law, we need to fix that, but okay. And then she held a press briefing to describe the incident and announce her results. Even if the shooting was rightly justified to be legal, the choice of facts that she presented at this press conference is just stunning to me. The violence that Patrick suffered was not even mentioned, but the fact that Patrick, a member of our community who's suffering from a terrible disease called schizophrenia, had old food and toilet paper in his car, was prominently featured. It leaves me speechless. So that leads me to my third point in 5 minutes, the policy ideas. And the first one is that we definitely need a truly independent investigation. One that includes not only the microseconds around when the trigger is pulled or the death occurred, but the relevant events leading up to that point. And these investigative results need to be presented to the public so the community can decide if what happened is acceptable. I think in my community, people here didn't know what happened. And so how can they say whether that's right or not if they don't know what happened? And I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I hadn't had the good fortune to be able to bring a lawsuit. Not every family can bring forth a lawsuit and bring this stuff to light. The family has to have emotional bandwidth to do this. I happen to be fortunate enough to have a stable marriage. We have a financial ability to do this. We've had excellent advice for legal counsel. But how many people have all those things line up? And why is it that I can bring forward a lawsuit and bring forth justice and truth because I have these resources and other people can't? That's not right. The truth and finding this out should not be dependent on our economic class, the color of my skin, socioeconomic classes, anything else. So you have to fix that. There has to be a way where there's somebody independent who's going to find out the true story and then present that to everybody. Otherwise, people can't decide if they're okay with that. Okay, so fine. If everybody in Springfield thinks this is great, what happened to Patrick, maybe I don't want to live here anymore. But they need to know what happened. And the second policy idea I would offer is my son was driving his car, violating no laws, his own car, nothing illicit, no weapons, never had a history of violence, and 5 minutes later, he's dead. And that was legal. So, yes, reasonable fear for their life, but what about necessary use of deadly force? And that's what they've done in California, my understanding is, for last year. They've changed their law to make it necessary use of deadly force, not reasonable. And I would urge you all on your committee to consider that, to find out what they did in California and see if that would work in Oregon. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am so sorry to hear of your son in the manner which died. I'm broken, and I agree with you and your family on this. I think that what you present is very not unreasonable, but something that I really want to look into. I am troubled when I hear the phrase that fear of my life. As a former police officer, the job inherently is for the brave. And if you are encountering a situation that you are fearful of your life, you may want to choose an alternative career path. The military is one that it is inherently conceive that at some point along your career, if you're in there, you will find yourself engaged in a conflict that may result in a lot of mayhem and even death. But you can't go in there saying that I am fear of my life because that is the nature of the job. And I want to make sure that we are preparing our officers with all of the protections that they need. But I don't want aggressive policing out there that is doing the kind of things that your family member, your child experienced just because they have that under the guise of the badge and gun. Those are not the people that I am looking for to protect. I am looking for the opportunity to protect those that are doing the right thing, that are peace officers. Police officers should not be warriors. Warriors are military. I train warriors as part of the military. Thank you for your service in the military as well. And we understand that there is a difference between a warrior and a peace officer, a guardian of and defender of the peace. So I'm looking forward to exploring the idea and the language that you have. Staff has taken note of that, and I think it's something that's worthy to pursue. With that, I will ask that we have one other presenter.